The Indian Air Force is upset as being seen as a supporting arm like the artillery and the engineers. The IAF sees this as lack of appreciation of the potential of air power, especially after Balakot bombing in India's context. As India moves forward towards setting up of theatre commands, is this a minor hiccup or a major hurdle? Shiv Arur and I bring you this report.
Do not forget that Air Force continues to remain a supporting arm to the armed forces, just as the artillery supports or the engineer support the combatant arms in the army.
This statement of General Bipin Rawat, Chief of the Defence Staff, sparked off an angry debate on the establishment of theatre commands and the role of the Indian Air Force. Speaking to India Today on Indian Air Force fears about its role in the setting up of theatre commands, Chief of Defence Staff General Rawat said that the Indian Air Force will be responsible for the air defence of the entire airspace of the country.
The entire airspace of the nation will be looked after by one air defence command. So we are creating one air defence command which will look after the entire nation's airspace.
The Indian Air Force will also, in addition, be responsible to provide air support to the army to achieve its aims on ground.
Air Force is not just responsible for air defence. It has got other charters. It has got a charter of providing close air support to the land forces when they undertake operations and for offensive air support in case you go into the adversary's territory.
But the Indian Air Force sees a bigger strategic role for itself in establishing total dominance in the skies.
It is not a supporting role alone. The air power has a huge role to play in any of the integrated battle area. It's not an issue of support alone.
The Indian Air Force has repeatedly insisted it is not against theatre commands being set up, but wants the Air Force not to be divided into different theatres.
We definitely need to improve our joint warfighting capabilities.
Top officials in the Department of Military Affairs tasked to take forward the theatre commands say IAF is not merely a support arm, but insist Air Force role in the foreseeable future would remain supporting land and sea-based forces achieve the national aim. Unlike the US, India is not an expeditionary force and the IAF combat role remains restricted to the region.
It has been learned that Air Force has some reservations regarding setup, asset management, but that is to create a better system of theaterization and functioning.
The effort in South Block now is to debate all issues threadbare and move forward together to protect national interest on land, sea, air, space and cyberspace. A task easier said than done. With Shiv Arur in Delhi, Gaurav Sawant for India Today. And joining me on India First is Lieutenant General Satish Dua, former Chief of the Integrated Defence Staff, Air Marshal P.K. Barbara, former Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Eastern Air Command, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, former Director General Infantry, and Air Marshal Nirdosh Tyagi, former Vice Chief of Air Staff. The finest voices on matters military and people who've seen integration up close and personal for their perspective on this big story. Air Marshal Barbara, if I may, why is the Indian Air Force upset with the comments of the Chief of Defence Staff on the role of Indian Air Force in theatre commands? Overall defence of India's airspace of the entire country is under Indian Air Force. Air Component Commander advises the theatre command on the use of air power. Why is the Air Force upset, sir?
Firstly, don't mind, Saurabh, I'll just correct you. I not only commanded Eastern Air Command, I commanded Western Air Command, and I was the former Vice Chief of Indian Air Force.
Absolutely, sir.
So that gives me a little bit bigger horizon than just Eastern Air Commander. Okay? Now, before I go into anything on this issue, I would like to just quickly go through few quotes, and quotes not made by Air Force personnel. It is by retired field marshals, retired generals of the world of great repute. So please don't mind, I'll just take up 2 minutes, maybe more. Core competency of air power are optional for other services. Please monitor. But if the nation is to remain capable and competent in air and space, someone must pay attention across the whole spectrum. That is why there is an Air Force. This is General Ronald A. Flugman. Then, air power has become predominant both as a deterrent into war and in the eventuality of war as a devastating force to destroy an enemy's potential and fatally undermine his will to wage war. General Bradley. Strategic air assault is rested in a, if it is in dissipated piecemeal, is sporadic, and the enemy has an opportunity to readjust. Lastly, I will just read out another famous Field Marshal, Montgomery, who made this statement, please. Whereas to shift the weight of effort on the ground from one point to another takes time, the flexibility inherent in Air Forces permits them without change of base to be switched from one and another to another. And lastly, I don't know if I should go through more of these because
Sir,
there's
I'm
so
sure there are
many
many.
of these.
Sir, role of air power is not in doubt anyways. My question
No,
to you,
there is
sir,
a doubt.
with due
There
respect,
is
since
a
brevity,
doubt.
sir, I have a show, sir. I have a time limit on a show. My only point is, where does theaterization take away from air power?
Look, it is very simple. As a thought process, India has to think about air power and theaterization in a different concept rather than following what other countries are doing. Now, who are these countries? There are small countries where limited boundaries can be used, where theater command can come in. Who's denying it? Yes, wherever there is a bigger country like the US, some EU countries, and they have no issues in the immediate vicinity, or have, like in the European Union, the NATO is there to look after. The US is feeling very safe within their own boundaries because it's an island, huge island state. India is a different game. Whilst I agree that in the theater commands, the factor of air defense can definitely be integrated by pulling in all the assets of all services within defined boundaries, weapon systems, communication systems which have got to be robust, and also there must be redundancy in this cyber war that will prevail even in that time.
Sir, my question still
And
remains,
maritime
how does
command-
theaterization take away from any of this? How does
Please.
theaterization take away from this? But let me take this to General Satish Dua. General Dua,
Now, I will
what
tell
was
you-
the role envisaged for Indian Air
have
Force
to
in
come to
theater commands? In theater
That
commands.
makes sense.
Sir, my request, General Air Marshal Barbara, is we'll have to keep this conversational, for the benefit of our wider audience. General Dua,
wider
what is
audience,
the role
they know-
envisaged for the Indian Air Force in theater commands? A strategic force that destroyed terror bases like at Balakot, or a force to provide close air support to the army in and perhaps around the borders?
Gaurav, let me make a larger point first. The government has taken a bold decision to integrate the three services, make integrated theatre commands as they're being called now. And I think it's a bold step, long overdue. They have given some targets and timelines. The CDS has been appointed. So what is happening now is the process of discussions, process of disagreements, process of disagreements and churning. It is bound to happen. There will be disagreements which will be resolved by the method of discussion. In fact, I would put it this way, that it is good that the churning, the disagreements are taking place now before the integration has been completed or started. So the point is, this is not to be seen as some kind of a contest. We are all, the three services and all other stakeholders put together, everyone is on the same side, and we are all working for the common good, which is security of the country.
Absolutely.
So having said that, coming specifically to your question about Air Force and Air Force role, because that seems to be the eye of the controversy for the last few days, Air Force plays the most important role because both Army and Navy require the support of the Air Force for their own operations. But Air Force by itself also plays a very large role in different level of operations, in shaping the battlefield, counter-air operations, and what have you. In any operation, at any one time, somebody will be supported and somebody will be supported. In the air defense operations, which Air Force will be the lead, any other assets or resources and elements would have to support whatever Air Force coordinates. In a land operation, we cannot do without the support from Air Force. And all in all, I am very pleased personally to see that now we are getting into a process of integration where we will all be able to synergize this much better than somehow it is coming out to be. The last sentence I'll say, this unseeming sort of controversy that we have been talking about, I wish it was not in the press or public domain, because these are the issues that will be resolved across the table, and that's what the Air Chief also mentioned.
In a democracy, even if it's being debated in public, I mean, it's after all our country, our Air Force, our Army, and issues in a democracy are being thrashed out in the open. But my point remains, how does theaterization take away from any of the air power or the role that it sees for itself? Air Marshal Tyagi, Indian Air Force often talks about the United States Air Force and how it can operate anywhere across the world and power projection. But sir, are we the United States Air Force? Do we lead those kinds of expeditionary operations far beyond our borders? Is that even the mandate of either the Indian Air Force or the armed forces? Or is the requirement closer home to help the army hold ground in and around the borders and perhaps interdict the enemy?
IAF role is not confined to what you said last. It is much beyond that. But let me just start with something in simple terms for your viewers. You see, what is support arm? Support arm, like artillery engineers, have their role subservient to the combat arms operating in the same sector. And important issue here is that both operate in the same sector. Air Force for Air Force, that sector dimension is too small. Air Force from one command can operate thousands of kilometers away. So it cannot be support arm to a very small segment. Second, the deep strike, interdiction, suppression of enemy air defense of the nation, maritime strikes, beyond the capability of integral maritime assets. All these are not something which can be assigned to a support arm. And this support arm issue is something which is discussed at major level in Defense Services Staff College. It's not a matter where somebody can at this stage say that Air Force is a support arm. This issue is settled much.
It's the nomenclature you're upset about. The Air Force is upset about only that nomenclature support arm.
No.
If you were to remove that nomenclature, If you were to
No,
remove
no,
remove
it's
that
not that.
terminology.
No, it is about the mindset. You see, the mindset is pre-World War II mindset. You see, when you do not realize the full potential of air power, you see, earlier, Air Force was carved out of the army. So earlier aircraft had only capability of observation and firing short distances. And the main role was in support of the forces in that sector. Even Indian Air Force, post independence, did not have assets which were capable of going deep strike. In 80s, things started changing. Today, Indian Air Force is not the Air Force which has equipment which is only can be confined to just supporting what CDS called as close air support.
No,
In
but
any case,
again, the point remains that may be your capability, or you may think that should be your capability. But do you have that capability as on date? Do you have that mandate as on date? Because General Kulkarni, if I may, why should the Indian Air Force, as Air Marshal Tyagi very rightly points out, be restricted to providing air support to infantry and armor? Why not see it as a strategic force that's capable of destroying enemy's assets deep inside the enemy's territory, degrade the enemy's warfighting capabilities or his industrial complex? The Indian Air Force can do that, and that is not the way Army is looking at it, just as a support arm.
Gaurav, let me first start to say that the support arm business has been blown out of proportion. Air Force is a decisive arm. There is no doubt on that score. Number one. Number two, we are not an expeditionary force. Number three, we have an enemy which is known, and all of us, the Indian armed forces, are responsible for the integrity and the sovereignty of the nation. And in that context, if we have today about 17 commands, and if they have to be integrated into 5, and of that, if there have to be 3 land force commands, obviously somebody would be in support of somebody. And therefore, to say that it is not close air support, let's not use the word close air support if that be so. Okay. But definitely, Air Force is a decisive arm. And if Air Force has been able to pulverize a particular target, you require boots on ground to go and occupy them. And therefore, let's put it this way, that theaterization has been done. We have the AOC&C Western Air Command. Does he not have resources primarily for the 2 army commands as of now? And if they're theaterized and it becomes the northern theater, the western theater, the eastern theater, the resources, the assets are going to be there. All of them, so much better that all of them will be applied at a target. Nobody is going to get left out of battle. We wouldn't want resources to be left out of battle. But being a decisive arm, it can be absolutely devastating. It can change the entire war. Therefore, to say we must not get, well, the reservations of the Air Force have not now. The reservations of the Air Force, even when in 2015, when the Prime Minister spoke of jointness, all of us were on board. Even today, everybody is on board. As regards the jointness is concerned, they've always had reservation about the word theaterization of command, thinking that the limited resources will get frittered away. The limited resources will get optimally utilized. Let's put it that way.
Air Marshal Barbara, since you've been AOC&C, Eastern Air Command, Western Air Command, and Vice Chief, now should the balloon go up, does the IAF have the capabilities that will enable it to destroy the enemy's economic, industrial, and military potential, or will it remain restricted to interdicting the enemy's supply lines close to the borders, perhaps like we saw in Kargil?
Please don't tie the Air Force's hands down. Please don't do that. You will reduce the potential of an asset which this nation has, because of fact that if we start thinking independently in such a manner that we are talking of, I want this, I want this, I want this for myself, for a theater command or something, you have reduced the national potential of the defense services. The Air Force is an air power. I've read out the quotes, is an air power which could be there also. The air power could be also there with the Army and the Navy. The Navy's already got it. The Army might get it tomorrow. No one is denying it. But they will be localized to the theater only. Air power in India has the potential even today, to be able to be used anywhere, anytime, depending on the national aim. It's an integrated battle, for goodness sake. 71.
But
Did
my
we
question
learn the
again remains, how is theaterization taking away from
my
that big
assets,
role of the
because
Indian Air
assets-
Force?
The Indian Air Force's assets will break up into piecemeal. The potential will never be derived in a piecemeal form of using this vital asset whose potential is phenomenal and has to be understood. Please.
No, I am. Let
us
me.
not go into this tutu meme kahan.
No,
Let
it's
us
not tutu meme, sir. It's far too serious. National security is not tutu meme. But
Yeah, because
General
we
Dua,
didn't start this tutu meme.
General Dua, if the assets are divided, between Eastern Air Command and Western Air Command, or Eastern Theatre and Western Theatre, will the importance of the Indian Air Force go down? Is this a genuine fear that meager assets being split would actually end up reducing the capability of the air power?
No, I don't think so. The importance of the importance of Air Force as a fighter service cannot go down. The purpose of creating integrated theaters is to give a better warfighting capability in a comprehensive manner to a theater commander who looks after a particular terrain and a particular adversary. So everything converges onto him rather than having to look back over his shoulder for assets and directions. So if there is a Western theater or a Northern, it will have the components of all the services and all stakeholders emanating under him, so that he can plan the operations and prosecute the operations in a comprehensive manner. To do that, this theaterization is being planned and is being executed.
Okay. Air Marshal Tyagi, Air Force assets, be it fighter planes or force multipliers like AVACs or mid-air refuelers, aren't they already divided between various commands? Not every Rafale is with the Western Air Command. How will theaterization make any difference? If they're required in the East, they can be shifted to the East. If they're required in the West, they can be shifted to the West. How does theaterization take away from the power of the Air Force?
Okay, the first thing is that, even at the end of this debate, there's no clarity. The government directive includes everything that you said Air Force should have. That means the ability to deep strike, interdiction, not confined to the theater. And we are debating it. At the end of the debate also, nobody has said that it is a part of the OP directive. So, which means that the knowledge about Air Force capability and its charter is so poor that somebody comes up and says that Air Force is only capable of support arm. If this is the mindset, how will you be able to utilize it?
Sir, haven't we moved beyond that point, sir?
Understanding the capability of the Air Force, then only you can. If you put somebody under somebody who does not understand it, it will not be utilized.
So you are saying that a CNC of the Air Force will not be reporting. You are saying that a 3-star Air Force will not report to a 3-star army. Is that what you're saying, sir? That is the objection.
I'm not saying no. I'm saying whoever has to take decision should be capable of understanding the capability of that force.
So you are saying army is not capable, an army 3-star general is not capable of understanding the significance of air power. General Dua.
No, see, Gaurav, let's all act mature. Let's not, make it, your question also, you are asking that Air Force General or Air Force Air Marshal will not take orders. I don't think, let's not get down to that kind of discussion.
No, sir, I'm bringing it down to the lowest common. I want to understand. It's just an understanding process.
Yeah. So Gaurav, it is not as if somebody will not take orders from somebody and things like that. You see, at the eye of the storm, let's face it, and let's be blunt about it. The eye of the storm is a certain discussion that took place, out of which a sentence or two were taken out, and that is forming the eye of the storm as of last 3-4 days.
Sir, but the objections predate that statement of the Chief of Defence Staff, sir.
True. So I'm coming to that. So we've already discussed, you've asked a question and everyone has responded to it as to how the assets of the Air Force as of today also are now between 5 operational commands. And here, the assets of the Air Force will perhaps come into three different theaters. Now, the point being made here is, in this manner, we will actually be more effective. But this specific thing, even the CDS, his statement said, we are not denying that Air Force is the lead service. Also, I mean, Air Force is the service too, as far as the air defense is concerned. He said, this is the Army way of putting it. He said, in the land operations, Air Force will be supporting us. And I do not agree with the fact that it is like a supporting arm. Not at all. In the Army, we have distinction between a fighting arm and a supporting arm, and then there are services. So in our manner of speaking, it has come out wrongly, and we are making a debate out of it. But I think we are all on the same side. And remember, when a nation or a country goes to war, it is not a certain component. The whole nation goes to war. And I think we are moving towards integration. This turning is inevitable.
Sir, that point taken. But Air Marshal Tyagi, if I may come back to you before I come to Air Marshal Barbara, if you have your Mirages and your Rafales in Eastern Theatre and in Western Theatre, how does that take away from their war-fighting capability, or even your AWACS or your mid-air refuelers? Whichever theatre requires them, they'll be shifted their primary role, secondary role. Isn't that how it happens always?
Yes, the chief can today direct that particular force be shifted from one theatre to other. He will lose that authority. You know, when you split the forces and put it under a theatre, the ability for Air Force to redeploy them in the sector where it is required will not be there anymore. That is the difference. It's a big difference. It means the theatre commander will utilize the assets the way he feels or his advisor feels right. And if you have any doubt about that, just replay General Rawat's. General Dua very rightly is trying to underplay it, and I agree with that. The issue should be underplayed, and it's not something where we should add fuel to fire. But just replay what General Rawat said. He didn't say what General Dua is saying. He said exactly what the debate is about. That Air Force is a support service only designated for supporting army in the localized support to the army.
With respect, the debate and Air Force's reservations predate General Bipin Rawat's interview and his comments to me. All of this debate predates that. Air Force reservations have been on for practically half a decade, if not longer. But and this was way before General Rawat said anything. But General Kulkarni, in Kargil it was said that the Army and the Air Force were not on the same page on operations. Indian Air Force says Army cannot tell Indian Air Force how to use its assets, or there will be a disaster like the Mi-17 that was shot down over Tololing.
See, Gaurav, it is only primarily for this kind of a situation not to crop up, that until and unless there is jointness, until and unless there is integration, until and unless you all understand and talk together and understand each other, what is our concept of war for India? That must be understood. Let's not look at USA and China or anybody. We have to have our concept of war with Indian characteristics. What are we here for? We have to ensure the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the nation. How do we do that with the forces that are available to us? How? By optimally utilizing the assets that are available to us. And therefore, each one of us has a role to play. I find no reason whatsoever for anybody to say everyone is in support of one another. If anybody tells me that one is not supporting the other, nothing like that. No, we are not an expeditionary force. We are here to defend our borders. What is the dispute between the two enemies that we have, China and Pakistan? The border dispute. Are we going to go beyond that? No. We have to ensure that we don't lose anymore. And if we can gain something more, so much better. That is what is the aim. And each one of us acts in that context, definitely. And again, coming down to the Kargil part of it, yes, there was a certain kind of a misunderstanding. Obviously, that misunderstanding came up because not many would know at that point of time, because of not much of integration and jointness in the training that had taken place, that you have something like smart bombs also, that you can take on a target from a great distance. So this may not strike somebody at that point of time in the decision. But if all of us are seated together, if all of us are working together, obviously the integration will lead to optimally utilizing the assets. But staying far away or even not being part of the co-headquarters, imagine the command headquarters of each of them where they are. And even in the There is a lot of problems that crop up. I personally feel integration and theatre command is the order of the day. Nothing we can turn it. After all, if you have to win a battle, you have given a Western theatre to a man, you've given a Northern theatre to a person to fight it out with the resources available. He will be given resources ab initio to work on. Obviously, they are under command to him. In support, all the other resources which are not being utilized somewhere will come in. But to say so, whether it is a high intensity war or it is just a local war, we have to have resources. How else does he plan?
Air Marshal Barbara, you agree with this point? That once the government takes a decision on theaterization and once the officer has made, the theatre commander, other supporting commanders will have to, divide assets, deploy assets and use them to the best of their ability. Once again, if I may come back to the Kargil issue, there are voices that say that had the Army and the Air Force been on the same page from the planning stage, IAF could have pulverized the peaks much earlier before infantry troops went up and perhaps many more lives could have been saved.
Yeah, but how many people know that to fire weapons at that altitude, India didn't have the capability, or the world maybe also had very less capability. Our aircraft, our Mirages were modified in this period of time to take part in the exercise, in the war or conflict. The MiG-21s tried it, they couldn't do it because weapon system platforms have to exist. Now, just to elaborate a little bit further, don't mind, please, I'm not against Army, Air Force, Navy, anything. I'm just saying, Tangail operations in 71, please, what happened? Who did the paradrop? Crossing of rivers by helicopters, your forces. It was an integrated battle. And that is how it should be. Yes, thereafter, just few MiG-21s. I know it for certain because I was there. Who went to governor's house when the critical meeting was taking place and hit the governor's house, did the surrender come up immediately. We made the mistake of not using air power in 62 for whatever be the reason. We should have learnt a lesson. Again, I am saying as a personal opinion, even now, in the north, what was happening when we had the air power fully available there, we did not use it. For what reason, I don't know. But it would have changed the whole complex. Yes, we would have suffered maybe also. But please don't disregard piecemeal use of air power. And not utilizing air power and sitting on the ground for any reason, keeping them tied up because that theatre has got lesser function at this moment of time, is diluting the whole national aim of war fighting capability. It's an integrated issue.
Sir, it is.
Yes,
but
doesn't mean it's integrated. Come
sir,
on.
but when integration in thought process comes, and not just in staff courses or not just at NDA and NDC, but in operations, wouldn't this knowledge spread much more? And instead of saying, it's my turf, I will use air power, let that knowledge spread further so that even if it is a theatre commander from in whites in the Navy or olive green in the Army, you use the same air power.
Who's denying? Who is denying?
Why then the reservation to theaterization?
The whole war in conjunction with the Army and Navy. Please, you must be very careful how you make statements in a media platform like this. You can't disrespect the three services and what are the capabilities. Please, it is incorrect for you as an anchor
Sir, I'm
on
asking
national
questions.
media to have made the statement, because we all three services have been side by side holding each other's hands and fighting any conflict that this nation is asked to go in. Okay?
Absolutely,
Please.
sir. General Dua, is the problem lack of jointness in operations at early stages or different stages? You know, whether you have NDA or you have staff college or NDC, staff courses, they may be training together. Is there the need now to spend more time in planning and executing operations at multiple levels, sir?
these tri-service institutions starting from NDA, we create very good interpersonal networks. And when the officers are from all three services, it does strengthen our ability to be able to function with each other. But the jointness or the integration, the synergy between the three services cannot be left hostage to some interpersonal relations, however good or strong they may be. This has to be there has to be a structural construct to it and an organizational construct to it, and that is what integration between the three services intends to bring. And I think this, not only that this is the way forward, this is something that is inevitable. It is being done well. This particular discussion notwithstanding, and I think we are moving well apart from the discussion that we are undertaking right now, and soon we are going to see the good effects of it. If for some reason some issues we are unable to resolve in time, maybe we will have extension of timelines, or maybe not. That remains to be seen.
Or, Air Marshal Tyagi, would it require an act of parliament to bring about that integration? It had to be done in the United States of America, where the Goldman-Nichols Act had to be brought in to bring about the integration. In the United Kingdom, it took a decade for this process to happen. Would that be required even in India?
No, whichever way it is done, if government gives an order, it will be followed. I don't think there is anybody has any doubt about that, and that's not what we are debating. If there is an order, no matter how it is issued, all three services will follow it, and that's not the question. A debate is about whether it is right or not, or whether it is right in this form or it should be in some other form. That's all we can debate about. But I don't think anybody in uniform will ever defy in this country any directions coming from the government and any order coming from government. I don't think, and nobody supports that. I mean, nobody in the Air Force supports that, nobody outside. So let's not get worried about that. Whatever orders are there, but the debate should be on so that we make sure, you see, Air Force assets are very expensive, nation has paid for it. There should be a mechanism to utilize it optimally. And if we are putting it, dividing it, distributing it, and where there is a concern that these may not be utilized optimally, then there should be a debate to address it before we move forward.
Okay. General Kulkarni, merit in the criticism that the army, to an extent, is unable to appreciate the canvas, the wide canvas of Indian Air Force operations. The theatre commander may want to restrict IAF operations just to close air support or some kind of air support, whereas the IAF may have capabilities that are far wider. IAF may have the capabilities, and I'm sure it does, to take out the enemy's industrial complex, degrade its war-fighting capabilities, not just at the LC or the LEC, but deeper, far deeper inside. So let the Air Force do what it can and not bring in perhaps, the Army's perspective into air operations.
Gaurav, much that we all appreciate, we understand that the Air Force has got multi-role aircrafts, that Air Force is not an air artillery. We all understand that Air Force is also for close air support and other tasks. Everybody understands that. It is not like that. The question is that once the theaterization takes place, all of it under one commander will understand each other better. If you go under a specific service command, that probably the understanding would only be at the right time. Somebody will say, okay, just tell me the target. Don't worry, I'll take on the target. It is not just tell me the targets and I'll take on the target. It's a question of being able to understand. And that understanding will only be in a theaterization. For instance, let's say that anybody who becomes a one-star general, we should have served on a common distinct in inter-services. Only then will you go up to understand and comprehend the other man's understanding. There are certain peculiar trends and etiquettes and norms of particular services which take time. Earlier, it is not just NDA or staff college or for that matter the NDC. These are only personality. Personalities don't count. They have to actually get on to the task that is at hand, and that can only be there when under a theatre everybody works as one, and that is where the understanding will come. Even promotions, I would say, anybody becoming a brigadier or equivalent one-star general, if only has served twice before in the joint this thing can go up because only then we understand what is
Fair enough.
what the and then
Air
only
Marshal
the
Barbara, last 30 seconds on the broadcast, if I may. You know, people have been talking about jointmanship and integration in Kargil War, immediately after Kargil War. So we've been having this discussion for close to 2 decades, 2015, 2017, multiple milestones. It can't be an endless discussion. So is there merit that there is a timeline? Now work together to achieve that in that timeline.
Okay. Firstly, I'll say hurry makes curry.
But sir, 2 decades.
Yeah, hurry will still make curry if we are rushing at theatre command at this moment. Theatre command, I would feel that if we all the 3 services have the assets, have the wherewithal, yes, it might come to be a reality, and depending on the government. And we will always look into it. But deliberations, a lot of deliberation is required as to how we use the full potential of this nation, the defense services of the nation, to the maximum capability, because the next conflict will be short and swift. And I'm sorry, we can't have tutu memes across a table saying, I will not give you this, I will not give you this, I will only give you this. Use the full potential. Please understand what is the full potential. And try and relate to Indian Air Force today as a strategic force. It is not anything else but a strategic force.
Fair enough, a strategic force that has multiple roles to perform. We will continue to have this debate in the days and weeks ahead, but it is, as always, a privilege to have amongst the finest military minds on this broadcast with us, General Dua, General Kulkarni, Air Marshal Tyagi and Air Marshal Barbara. Many thanks for joining me here on India First. A quick break. Coming up on the other side, it's the Rafale controversy that crops up once again. There's another very big story that's coming up.